The wind whipping off Lake Michigan has always carried whispers through the city of Chicago, but few tales are as enduring, or as chilling, as the legend of Resurrection Mary. She is the quintessential American ghost story, a spectral icon whose fame rivals the city's most beloved landmarks. Born in the shadowed years of the Great Depression, the story of Mary is not just a local haunting. It's a piece of Chicago's cultural fabric, a cautionary tale echoing the loneliness and transient nature of life along its storied highways. The tale's true genesis lies in the 1930s, an era when roadhouses and dance halls dotted the outskirts of the sprawling metropolis, offering brief, glittering escapes from economic hardship. It was an age of independence for young people, who would often travel miles outside the city limits for a night of dancing and revelry. This transient pleasure, however, carried inherent risk, especially along the dark, sparsely developed stretches of Archer Avenue, a road that would soon become synonymous with Mary's haunting. Resurrection Mary is almost universally described as a beautiful, fair-haired young woman wearing a shimmering white party dress, perhaps a victim of a hit-and-run accident on her way home from one such dance. The most consistent element of the legend is her methodology. She appears as a classic phantom hitchhiker, flagging down unsuspecting motorists along Archer Avenue, usually in the vicinity of Willowbrook Ballroom or, in later accounts, just a short distance from her final destination. When a kind-hearted driver stops to offer a ride, she accepts, her demeanor described as quiet, reserved, and often melancholic. The conversation, if any, is brief. She speaks only of needing to get home. The true terror, however, comes as the car approaches the high, wrought-iron gates of Resurrection Cemetery on the border of Justice Park, Illinois. In a flash, and without the driver ever pulling over or opening a door, Mary vanishes into thin air, leaving the horrified motorist staring at the gravestones and mausoleums. This simple, repeated narrative, the ride, the silence, the vanishing at the gates, is what cemented the legend's place in history. It began not with one grand apparition, but with a succession of seemingly unrelated reports from cab drivers, policemen, and ordinary citizens throughout the mid-20th century. Each encounter acted as a testimonial, building an oral tradition so strong that Resurrection Mary became the collective memory of the area's spectral resident. The cemetery itself, with its imposing name, seemed a perfect, poetic final resting place for such a tragically youthful spirit. Crucially, the Resurrection Mary legend provided a compelling, if ghostly, explanation for the pervasive sense of unease felt by many driving that particular stretch of road at night. She transformed a simple, dark road into a legendary site of paranormal activity. While the search for the historical Mary, the real-life girl whose death might have inspired the tale, has been a decades-long quest, it is the ghost Mary that truly endures. She is Chicago's very own spectral ambassador, a sorrowful reminder of a life cut short, forever seeking a ride home from the night she never finished. The year was likely 1934 or 1935. The exact date is as elusive as the phantom herself. But the setting was undeniably the Willowbrook Ballroom, originally called the O. Henry Park Ballroom in the suburb of Willow Springs. It was a massive, ornate hall, a beacon of light and music that pulled young people from all corners of Chicago and its surrounding areas, desperate to forget the drudgery of the Depression, even for a few glorious hours. This was the scene of Mary's final, earthly moments of joy. Though no single, verified identity has ever been conclusively attached to the ghost, the details of her tragedy are woven deep into the fabric of the legend. She was young, perhaps 17 or 18, dressed in a delicate white party dress that swirled around her ankles as she moved gracefully across the polished wooden floor. She was likely there with a date, or perhaps a group of girlfriends, savoring the lively sounds of the big band that night. The legend suggests that Mary had a bitter argument with her escort. The catalyst is unknown, a jealous glance, a perceived slight, or perhaps a simple disagreement over when to leave. In a fit of teenage frustration and independent spirit, Mary stormed out of the ballroom and into the biting chill of the autumn night. She refused to wait, too proud or too angry to accept a ride back with the person who had brought her. Her decision led her onto Archer Avenue, a dark, winding road that seemed endless in the pre-dawn hours. She began the long, dangerous walk toward home, which was believed to be somewhere south, in the direction of Justice Park and the nearby cemeteries. Walking alone on a major thoroughfare at that time was a perilous choice. The road was largely unlit, and the drivers, often returning from their own nights of revelry, might not be fully attentive. The tragedy struck swiftly. A car, its lights a sudden, blinding terror in the darkness, came upon her. Whether the driver was reckless, distracted, or simply failed to see the young woman in the dark clothing walking along the roadside remains unknown. The impact was fatal and instantaneous. Mary was killed, her vibrant life extinguished in the unforgiving cold of the Chicago night, her party dress now stained and torn. The driver, in a final act of cowardice or panic, did not stop, leaving the young woman's body on the side of the infamous road. Her anguished parents, notified of the horrific accident, are said to have insisted she be buried in her favorite white party dress, interred not far from the site of her death, within the imposing gates of Resurrection Cemetery. It is this tragic, lonely walk and subsequent death that anchors the legend, transforming a night of innocent fun into an eternal journey. The common belief among those who have seen her is that Mary, trapped in the repeating loop of her trauma, is forever attempting to complete that walk home. Every time she accepts a ride from a kind-hearted soul, she is simply trying to retrace the journey that was so violently interrupted. Her vanishing at the cemetery gates is not just a cheap scare. It is the moment she realizes, over and over again, that her journey is truly over, and she must return to the plot where her dancing feet were finally laid to rest. This is why her haunting is so mournful. She is the perpetually young woman, forever denied the simple closure of arriving safely home. Archer Avenue is more than just a road that slices through the southwest suburbs of Chicago. It is the geographical soul of the Resurrection Mary legend. For nearly 2 centuries, this stretch of asphalt has been an artery of commerce, development, and famously, ghostly encounters. Its history is deep and layered, running from downtown Chicago all the way to Lockport, and much of the area it traverses was once swampland and forest, lending an early air of isolation and gloom to the environment. Before the age of automobiles, Archer Avenue followed an ancient Native American trail, a path naturally suited for travel, but which later became notorious for its dark, winding sections, particularly where it runs near the Des Plaines River and the surrounding suburbs of Justice, Willow Springs, and Summit. This area is the prime hunting ground for the Spectral hitchhiker. Unlike a simple city street, Archer Avenue in this sector is a transition zone, a dark, often lonely road that links the bustling urban life Mary left behind with the quiet, perpetual stillness of her final resting place. The road's infamy is tied directly to its proximity to the vast expanse of Resurrection Cemetery and other historic burial grounds. The clustering of cemeteries along this highway, including not only Resurrection, but also St. Casimir and Bethania, means that drivers frequently encounter long stretches where the high fences and stone monuments are the only neighbors. At night, these sections are particularly oppressive. The canopy of trees often blocks the moonlight, and the lack of commercial lighting creates pockets of profound darkness perfect for a phantom to materialize. It is along this specific 3-mile stretch near the cemetery gates that countless drivers have reported the chilling experience. The road here is unforgiving. High speeds are common, and the sudden appearance of a pedestrian, let alone a translucent one, is deeply unsettling. The encounters are so numerous and consistent that local residents treat the sightings not as one-off hallucinations, but as a genuine, repeatable phenomenon tied to the road itself. Many attribute the high frequency of Mary's appearances to the road's energy. Archer Avenue has a long history of severe traffic accidents and tragedies, making it, in the minds of some paranormal researchers, a hotspot for residual energy and spiritual distress. The combination of its isolated location, its association with death, and the sheer number of vehicles passing by every night seems to provide the perfect conditions for Mary's spirit to briefly manifest. Even in the daylight, Archer Avenue carries a certain solemnity. But it is after the Willowbrook Ballroom has closed and the final headlights dim that the highway truly becomes the stage for the recurring drama. The legend ensures that every driver who travels this road at night, especially alone, does so with a heightened sense of awareness, glancing into the rearview mirror, checking the roadside, and feeling the inescapable chill of Chicago's most famous spectral icon. The road is not merely a path. It is the boundary between the living world and the eternal dance Mary is forever trying to escape. The tale of Resurrection Mary, while distinctively Chicagoan, is not an isolated phenomenon. It is a profound and perfect example of the phantom hitchhiker archetype, a global folkloric narrative that has found a special, terrifying resonance within the vast landscape of American urban legends. This specific type of ghost story speaks deeply to the collective subconscious of a society defined by the automobile and the open road, capturing anxieties about travel, isolation, and sudden, unseen mortality. The core narrative of the phantom hitchhiker is strikingly consistent across state lines and generations. A driver encounters a mysterious, solitary figure, almost always a young woman, on a deserted road late at night. The driver offers a kindness, a ride, only for the figure to vanish moments later, typically at a significant geographical marker such as a bridge, a curve in the road, or most poignantly, a cemetery. This structure is universally recognizable, with Mary merely being the most famous iteration in the Midwest. In the American context, this archetype serves several cultural purposes. Firstly, it embodies the inherent danger of the open road. For a nation that romanticizes the freedom of cross-country travel, the phantom hitchhiker acts as a stark, folkloric counterpoint, reminding drivers that the vast darkness outside their headlights is uncontrolled and can conceal tragedy. These legends are often born on long, isolated highways, like Archer Avenue, where accidents are common and help is far away. Secondly, the story is a cautionary tale about morality and chivalry. The hitchhiker is always portrayed as vulnerable and in need of assistance. The ghost only appears to drivers who are kind enough to stop. When Mary appears, she appeals to the driver's sense of duty. Her vanishing act, therefore, is an unnerving reward for kindness. The driver is left not with the satisfaction of having helped someone, but with the terrifying realization of having communed with the dead. This twist subverts the traditional narrative of reward for good deeds. Furthermore, these legends often act as historical markers. Just as the ghosts of Civil War soldiers haunt battlefields, phantom hitchhikers often represent victims of specific local tragedies, usually those who died alone or were abandoned. Resurrection Mary's story of leaving the dance hall after an argument and being struck by a hit-and-run driver encapsulates this perfectly. She is a reminder of the fragility of life during the 1930s, a time when transportation was less safe and societal structures were strained. Ultimately, the power of the phantom hitchhiker, and Mary in particular, lies in the fact that the story is always told as a friend of a friend, account, or a personal experience. This lack of a definitive source makes the legend highly adaptable and deeply believable. Every time a car stops on Archer Avenue, the driver is unknowingly participating in a living, evolving tradition. Resurrection Mary is, therefore, the Chicago face of a national anxiety, a powerful spectral figure who proves that even on the most mundane suburban roads, the past is never truly finished with the present. To truly understand the mournful spirit of Resurrection Mary, one must first step back into the distinctive atmosphere of the 1930s, a decade defined by profound social contradictions. It was the heart of the Great Depression, a time when despair and widespread poverty gripped the nation. Yet, parallel to the soup lines and economic hardship, a vibrant, almost desperate need for distraction and escape thrived. This need fueled the spectacular rise of the American dance hall era. These massive ballrooms and roadhouses, often located just outside city limits where land was cheap and laws were looser, served as glittering oases. They were grand, architecturally ambitious spaces designed to transport patrons, if only for a few hours, away from the grim reality of the outside world. The sound of big band jazz, the infectious rhythms of Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, and Glenn Miller provided the soundtrack to this cultural defiance. In Chicago, the Willowbrook Ballroom stood as a prime example. Opened in 1921 and later expanded, it became an institution along Archer Avenue. It was here, under the soaring ceilings and the hypnotic spin of colored lights, that young men and women shed the austerity of their daily lives. The dance hall was a crucial social crucible, a place where courtships were established, independence was asserted, and the strict societal rules of the past generation were momentarily relaxed. For women like the young woman who would become Resurrection Mary, the dance hall represented a precious autonomy. Dressed in their finest, often homemade white party frocks, they would travel long distances to participate in the communal joy of the dance. These expeditions, however, were not without their perils. Traveling to and from these isolated venues, particularly late at night, often meant hitchhiking or relying on dates who may have been drinking. This vulnerability adds a tragic layer to Mary's story. The 1930s setting is crucial because it contextualizes Mary's decision to leave the ballroom alone. In a society struggling for structure, Moments of emotional volatility, like a sudden argument with a date, could lead to drastic, dangerous decisions. When Mary stepped out of the warm, jazz-filled glow of the Willowbrook and onto the cold, unlit stretch of Archer Avenue, she was not just leaving a party. She was transitioning from a world of artificial security back into the harsh, unforgiving reality of Depression-era life. The Phantom's attire, the elegant white dress, is also a direct relic of this era. It ties her eternally to the last night she was truly alive, forever frozen in the moment of her greatest freedom and subsequent greatest tragedy. Her spectral appearances are, in essence, a haunting reenactment of the precarious journey home that so many young people undertook in the 1930s, making her a spectral symbol not just of a single accident, but of the dangerous, ephemeral beauty of the dance hall era. The Resurrection Mary legend owes its extraordinary longevity not to sensationalist newspaper articles or fictional accounts, but to the sheer volume and chilling consistency of witness accounts, spanning nearly a century. These are the testimonies of ordinary citizens, cab drivers, police officers, and suburban commuters, who share the common, terrifying thread of picking up a beautiful, silent girl on Archer Avenue only to have her vanish without a trace. The earliest and perhaps most famous, reliable sighting is attributed to a man named Jerry Pallas in 1939. Driving home late at night, Pallas spotted a young woman walking near the Willowbrook ballroom. She was described as having fair hair, a light-colored party dress, and a delicate shawl. Feeling sympathetic, Pallas offered her a ride. The girl was silent for most of the trip, offering only brief directions. When they reached the looming, spiked gates of Resurrection Cemetery, she cried out, "I'm home now!" And as Pallas slowed the car, she simply dissolved into thin air right before his eyes, leaving a distinct, cold scent behind. Pallas, terrified, later reported the incident to the police, his shock lending credibility to the event. Decades later, the pattern continued with frightening regularity. In the 1970s and 80s, Chicago cab drivers frequently became unwilling participants in Mary's eternal journey. They would report picking up a passenger fitting Mary's description, often noting that she insisted on sitting in the back seat, near the door, and the fare would inevitably end just outside the cemetery. When the driver turned around to collect the money, the seat would be empty, the back door still securely locked, or sometimes, strangely, ajar. A notable characteristic of the encounters is the physical sensation reported by the drivers. Many recall a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature inside the car as soon as Mary entered or vanished. Some even recount being able to drive their hand right through where she appeared to be sitting, feeling nothing but cold air, before dismissing the event as a trick of the light, until she disappeared completely. The consistency of the details is what bolsters the legend. The witnesses, often unrelated and unaware of each other's experiences until they shared their stories, almost always agree on 4 critical points. 1. The location. Archer Avenue near the Willowbrook Ballroom or Resurrection Cemetery. 2. The appearance, a young woman in a white light dress, seemingly a pedestrian. 3. The destination, the immediate vicinity of the cemetery gates. 4. The vanishing. Disappearing while inside the moving or slowing car, without opening the doors. These terrifying, first-hand accounts have served as the living fuel for the legend, transforming an anonymous ghost story into a local reality. For the witnesses, the encounters are not folklore. They are a genuinely inexplicable and deeply unnerving moment when the veil between the world of the living and the realm of the dead was momentarily lifted, forever branding them as unwilling participants in the tragic, repeated history of Resurrection Mary's final, interrupted ride home. While the act of Resurrection Mary's vanishing is the climax of her legend, the consistency in the descriptions of her physical appearance, particularly her clothing, is what gives the tale its historical anchorage and emotional depth. She is not a terrifying specter cloaked in shadow, but a figure of ethereal, almost heartbreaking beauty, forever dressed for a party she never quite finished. The core of her description centers on a white or light-colored party dress. This detail is crucial, as it immediately situates her in the context of the 1930s dance hall era. The dress would have been fashionable for the time, possibly a silk or rayon number with a dropped waist or a flowing skirt, perfect for twirling to the swing rhythms of the big bands. The light color emphasizes her youth and innocence, contrasting sharply with the dark, solitary road where she tragically met her end. This white dress acts as a symbol of her final night of joy, a costume of celebration frozen in time by tragedy. Adding to her distinct, period-specific look is the mention of a light, thin shawl or wrap. This detail speaks directly to the reality of Chicago winters and the typical apparel needed when leaving a warm, crowded dance hall. She is often described as seeming cold, her arms perhaps crossed, or huddled slightly within this thin covering. This mundane, practical detail ironically lends a powerful layer of realism to the supernatural figure, suggesting that she is a ghost of a specific person at a specific moment in time, still feeling the chill of that fateful night. Her hair is almost always described as fair, light, or blonde. Her complexion is noted as being pale, though this pallor is often seen as a reflection of her ghostly state rather than a sign of her being physically ill. Her eyes, however, are perhaps the most unsettling feature. Witnesses frequently recall them being large, sad, and empty of light, a haunting gaze that conveys a deep, abiding sorrow and loneliness. She is beautiful, but her beauty is permeated by a profound sense of loss. When she flags down cars, she presents the perfect picture of a stranded young woman, vulnerable and in need of assistance. She appears solid, real, and fully three-dimensional. This ability to temporarily manifest as a living person is what makes the vanishing act so profoundly shocking. Drivers often describe feeling her presence, hearing the rustle of her dress, and sometimes even seeing the reflection of her light attire in the dark cabin of the car. In one well-documented 1970s account, a witness claimed that as Mary sat in his car, she left a distinct scorch mark on the seat where she was sitting. Though this detail is less common, it adds to the lore that her ghostly garb is not merely an illusion, but is infused with a kind of chilling, residual energy. Mary's ghostly garb is more than just clothing. It is the uniform of her tragedy. It links her irrevocably to the Willowbrook ballroom and the night she walked out on her life, making her appearance a constant, sorrowful reminder of the young, vibrant woman who never made it home. The climax of every resurrection Mary sighting is the event that has cemented her legend. The inexplicable and utterly terrifying moment of her disappearance at the cemetery gates. This is the core structural element of the narrative, the point where the mundane act of driving transitions instantly into the realm of the supernatural, leaving drivers shocked, confused, and forever altered by their brush with the unknown. The sequence begins with the kind-hearted driver, having offered a ride to the seemingly distressed young woman on Archer Avenue. They are usually engrossed in the driving or attempting polite conversation with their quiet, pale passenger. The destination is always specific, though Mary rarely names the cemetery. Instead, she directs the driver to a point near it, often growing restless or agitated as they approach the location. The tension builds as the car draws near the massive, ornate iron fence and stone entrance of Resurrection Cemetery in Justice, Illinois. As the car slows, or sometimes even while it is still moving at a reasonable speed, Mary lets out a cry, a soft gasp, or simply whispers, "I'm home," or "Here we are." This is the signal for the impossible to occur. In a fraction of a second, the figure occupying the seat next to the driver or in the back is gone. She doesn't open the door, she doesn't slide out. She simply ceases to exist within the physical space of the vehicle. The driver's immediate reaction is almost universally one of profound confusion followed by terror. They slam on the brakes, look wildly around, often checking the seat and the pavement outside. The back door where Mary might have been sitting is often found to be locked or still latched from the inside, providing chilling proof that she could not have simply stepped out. All that remains is the echoing silence, the cold air that sometimes lingers, and the unsettling view of the cemetery's dark monuments stretching into the distance. The specific location of the vanishing is key to understanding the deeper psychological impact of the legend. The cemetery gates represent the absolute boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Mary's ability to traverse this boundary at will suggests she is spiritually anchored to the place. Her repeated failure to complete the journey, her eternal need for a ride, implies that she is trapped in a loop of her own traumatic death. The driver, in offering help, temporarily disrupts this loop, but the spectral chains of her tragedy pull her back the moment she reaches her intended destination. The sudden nature of the disappearance is what distinguishes the phantom hitchhiker story from a simple haunting. It is a calculated narrative device that delivers maximum shock, forcing the witness to confront the reality of the paranormal with immediate and undeniable evidence. For the drivers who experienced it, the image of the empty seat and the looming cemetery gates is an eternal, chilling memory proof that on Archer Avenue, The boundary between life and death is terrifyingly thin. No discussion of Resurrection Mary is complete without focusing on the imposing, solemn presence of Resurrection Cemetery, the very epicenter of her haunting and the chilling destination of her endless rides. Located in Justice, Illinois, this large Catholic burial ground is more than just a place of rest. It is the immovable anchor of the legend, the magnetic pole to which Mary's spirit is eternally drawn. The cemetery itself possesses an air of profound, old-world gravity. Established in 1904, its grounds are meticulously maintained, yet its size and the density of its monuments, particularly the older sections near Archer Avenue, contribute to an atmosphere of hushed, almost brooding silence. The high, wrought-iron gates and solid stone entrance, which loom ominously over the passing traffic, serve as the unmistakable visual cue in every witness account. These gates are the final, terrifying stop sign for Mary's escorts, marking the precise boundary between the world of the living and the realm where she belongs. The name Resurrection Cemetery itself is a stroke of ironic genius for the ghost story. The word resurrection evokes hope and a spiritual awakening, yet for Mary, it represents a spectral imprisonment. She is eternally resurrected, not into life, but into a constant, repeated reenactment of her final, tragic journey. The cemetery's name inadvertently lends a poetic, religious weight to the folkloric narrative, suggesting that her inability to rest is a spiritual matter, not merely a spooky one. For decades, the cemetery staff and local residents have been accustomed to the continuous flow of curiosity seekers, ghost hunters, and drivers who stop, sometimes timidly, sometimes boldly, to investigate the location. Though the gates are typically locked at night, the area surrounding the entrance remains the primary location for reported sightings. Mary never seems to venture deep into the grounds. Her focus is always the perimeter, the edge where the world she left intersects with the world that claimed her. The physical evidence tied to the cemetery is perhaps the most compelling detail of the entire legend. Most famously, there are enduring tailies of handprints, small, ghostly markings, appearing on the inside of the cemetery's heavy iron gates. These prints are said to be visible in the early morning, as if a desperate person tried to grasp the bars to escape or gain entrance. Whether these prints are real, residual energy marks, or simply part of the embellished lore, they serve as a chilling physical manifestation of Mary's connection to her grave, suggesting she is constantly trying to pass through the barrier that holds her captive. Resurrection Cemetery, therefore, is not merely a backdrop for the story. It is a character in its own right. Its somber presence and iconic gates define the narrative's climax, providing the ultimate inescapable proof that the kind, quiet girl picked up on the road is, in fact, a spirit returning to her eternal, yet restless home. While the repeated vanishing at the gates of Resurrection Cemetery provides the narrative climax, the enduring physical anomalies linked to the site, specifically, the whispered tailies of scorched handprints and disturbed tombstones, offer tantalizing, though unverified, proof of Mary's supernatural presence. These alleged physical clues transform the legend from a simple traveler's ghost story into a concrete, localized haunting. The most famous of these physical manifestations involves the cemetery's main entrance gates. For decades, stories have circulated that sometimes, on cold mornings following a sighting, the wrought iron bars show faint, small handprints. These prints are described as having an unnaturally high temperature or a cold, ashy quality, suggesting they were left by a spectral presence trying to pass through the locked gate. These aren't attributed to vandalism. Rather, they are seen as the residual energy of Mary's final, desperate attempt to enter her home after a futile ride. Cemetery workers and local police, while officially denying the persistence of such marks, have privately fueled the lore through ambiguous statements and accounts of inexplicable damage. Beyond the gates, the focus of the physical evidence shifts to the Resurrection Mausoleum itself, or possibly a specific, unmarked crypt within the grounds. Though the exact location remains ambiguous due to the secrecy surrounding the possible real-life Mary's grave, the legend dictates that her restless spirit has caused visible disturbance to her own final resting place. One persistent account speaks of a large, heavy marble or granite monument being slightly shifted or disturbed after a night of reported sightings. This suggests a restless energy powerful enough to interact physically with the real world, even in minute ways. Even more dramatically, some stories claim that scorched handprints have appeared on the stone of a tomb or crypt near the front of the cemetery. The burns are not deep, but they are clearly visible and cannot be easily scrubbed away. These marks are often interpreted as Mary reaching out in distress from her grave, or perhaps attempting to push her way out, unable to find peace. The act of scorching stone with a spiritual touch is a powerful image, indicating the high thermal energy associated with her manifestation, a physical counterpoint to the chilling cold drivers often report in their cars. These alleged physical clues serve a vital function in the evolution of the Resurrection Mary legend. In the absence of a verifiable body or a simple explanation, these supposed handprints and tombstone disturbances act as tangible anchors for the intangible ghost. They encourage visitation, investigation, and debate, turning the cemetery into a pilgrimage site for those seeking to validate the supernatural story. They allow believers to claim that the evidence is not just anecdotal, but is literally etched into the stone and iron of the very place Mary calls her eternal and eternally restless home. For all its supernatural appeal, the enduring mystery of Resurrection Mary ultimately rests on a tantalizing question. Was there a real Mary? The search for the historical figure behind the spectral hitchhiker has been a continuous, decades-long quest undertaken by journalists, folklorists, and dedicated amateur investigators, all seeking to ground the ephemeral ghost story in solid, tragic fact. The general consensus among researchers is that the ghost is likely a composite figure, a blending of several different real-life tragedies that occurred along Archer Avenue in the 1930s. However, one historical candidate stands out above the rest: a young woman named Mary Bregovy. Mary Bregovy tragically died in a car accident in 1934. She had reportedly been at a dance hall, though not definitively the Willowbrook, and the accident occurred on or near Archer Avenue. She was young, fair-haired, and her untimely death fit the timeline of the earliest sightings. While this correlation is compelling, the link remains tenuous. Mary Bregovy was not buried in Resurrection Cemetery, but rather in another local cemetery. This discrepancy forces investigators to conclude that while her death perfectly captured the spirit of the legend, she is unlikely the specific ghost. Other candidates have been proposed over the years, each fitting a few pieces of the puzzle, but none fitting them all. There was a report of a young woman named Anna Mary Norkus who died in a 1927 accident and was buried at Resurrection Cemetery. Another theory involves a girl named Mary Miskowski, who died in the area in 1930. These various theories highlight the difficulty of connecting a vague, folkloric account with the specific records of the past. The ghost story, through countless retellings, likely merged the location of one grave Resurrection Cemetery with the circumstances of another girl's tragic death, leaving a dance hall on Archer Avenue. The need to find a single historical Mary speaks to a deeper human desire to rationalize the supernatural. If the ghost has an identity, she ceases to be a terrifying, random force and becomes a specific, mournful victim who deserves to be put to rest. Finding her name would offer a form of closure, both for the spectral figure and for the collective fear she embodies. However, many folklorists argue that the search for a singular historical figure is futile and perhaps even misses the point. The power of Resurrection Mary lies precisely in her anonymity. She is not the ghost of one girl, but the ghost of every girl, every young life cut short by the perils of the road, the economic pressures of the time, or the recklessness of others. The ultimate identity of Resurrection Mary may forever remain one of Chicago's most guarded secrets, interred beneath the collective memory of a tragic era. She lives on, not in a dusty birth certificate, but in the white party dress, the chilling silence, and the endless loop of her journey home. The tale of Resurrection Mary has long since transcended its origins as a local phantom hitchhiker story, evolving into a genuine American cultural touchstone. Her chilling narrative has captivated artists, filmmakers, musicians, and writers, cementing her place in the popular imagination far beyond the confines of Archer Avenue. The most direct and enduring cultural impact is her status as a paragon of American urban legend. She is frequently cited in books and documentaries dedicated to the topic, often presented as the quintessential example of the phantom hitchhiker archetype. This exposure has turned the story into a kind of macabre travelogue, drawing paranormal enthusiasts from across the globe to the gates of Resurrection Cemetery. In the world of music, Mary's sorrowful and romantic tragedy has inspired several artistic interpretations. Perhaps the most famous is the song Resurrection Mary by the popular Irish-American folk band, the Spanic Boys, which mournfully recounts her story. Other local Chicago bands and folk artists have incorporated the legend into their own compositions, using Mary as a poetic symbol of lost youth and Chicago's melancholic history. These songs often capture the duality of her story, the joy of the dance hall contrasted with the finality of the grave. The narrative's cinematic potential has also been explored, albeit often indirectly. The theme of the hitchhiking ghost who vanishes is a trope frequently used in horror and suspense films, with Mary serving as the unofficial blueprint. While a major studio film has yet to fully capture the definitive version of her story, direct-to-video features and independent movies, such as the 1993 film Resurrection Mary, have attempted to dramatize the chilling encounters and the investigation into her identity. These visual adaptations often take liberties, yet they rely on the audience's pre-existing knowledge of the legend to amplify the suspense. The media's fascination ensures Mary remains current. She has been featured prominently in numerous television specials dedicated to ghosts and paranormal investigations, including shows like Unsolved Mysteries and various travel and history channels. These segments often combine historical context with recreations of the frightening encounters, lending a veneer of scientific credibility to the folklore. For the American public, these television appearances transform Mary from a regional myth into a nationally recognized supernatural entity. Furthermore, the legend has a noticeable effect on local Chicago culture and commerce. Tour operators now include Mary sightings as a key feature on Ghost Tour, capitalizing on the chilling reputation of Archer Avenue. The Willowbrook Ballroom itself, prior to its destruction by fire, was forever marked by its association with the ghost, with patrons often sharing hushed stories of potential sightings. Ultimately, Resurrection Mary's cultural impact lies in her ability to adapt and endure. She is a reminder that even in a modern, cynical age, there is still room for tragedy and mystery. Her story continues to be retold, adapted, and consumed, ensuring that the beautiful, pale girl in the white party dress remains one of Chicago's most famous and enduring spectral stars. For every witness who swears they encountered the spectral figure of Resurrection Mary, there are psychological and sociological experts ready to offer rational, non-supernatural explanations for the enduring phenomenon. These theories do not necessarily dismiss the sincerity of the witnesses, but rather seek to understand the powerful human factors that allow a ghost story to take root and sustain itself for nearly a century. One prominent theory centers on shared or collective trauma. The legend emerged during the Great Depression, a period marked by profound economic insecurity, loneliness, and the stress of a rapidly modernizing society. The story of a young, vulnerable woman dying alone on a dark road resonated deeply with the collective anxieties of the time. The repeated sighting of Mary became a folkloric mechanism for processing these fears. Drivers, particularly those traveling alone late at night, were psychologically primed to interpret any fleeting image, a swirl of fog, a reflection, or a trick of the light, as the figure they knew was supposed to be there. Another significant psychological factor is suggestion and expectation. Once the story of Resurrection Mary became entrenched in Chicago lore, Archer Avenue ceased to be just a road. It became a known haunted site. Anyone driving that specific stretch, especially after visiting a nearby bar or dance hall, is aware of the legend. This heightened state of expectation can lead to a phenomenon known as pareidolia, where the brain perceives meaningful images, like a human form in random or ambiguous stimuli. The mind fills in the blanks, ensuring that the next time a driver sees a pale shape near the cemetery gates, the cultural script dictates it must be Mary. The concept of mass hysteria also plays a role, albeit a gradual one. Unlike acute, localized outbreaks of mass hysteria, Mary's legend grew through the serial recounting of similar experiences. Each new witness account, whether genuine or based on suggestion, reinforces the prior stories. This creates a positive feedback loop. The more people claim to see her, the more credible the phenomenon becomes, increasing the likelihood that the next person will also see her. In this context, the witnesses are not lying. They are genuinely experiencing what their minds are prepared to perceive. Furthermore, the specific location, Archer Avenue near the cemeteries, lends itself to these psychological interpretations. Driving at night on a dark, winding road can induce a state of hypnotic fatigue, making drivers more susceptible to suggestion and visual illusion. The looming presence of the cemetery gates, with their powerful association with death and finality, provides the perfect trigger point for the climax of the perceived event. The sudden, terrifying vanishing can be explained as a momentary lapse in attention, a brief microsleep, or the brain suddenly correcting a visual misinterpretation. In essence, the psychological explanations suggest that Resurrection Mary is less a literal ghost and more a powerful cultural projection. She is the embodiment of Chicago's road anxieties, a product of shared social stress, and a testament to the human mind's remarkable ability to generate reality from expectation. The story endures not because a ghost is physically haunting the road, but because the human need to believe in her remains perpetually active. Despite the passage of nearly a century and the massive urbanization of the Chicago suburbs, the legend of Resurrection Mary is not a dusty relic of the past. It is a vital, persistent piece of local lore that continues to influence the collective consciousness of modern Chicagoans. In a world dominated by GPS and instant communication, the spectral hitchhiker remains a surprisingly relevant figure, a romanticized link to the city's darker, more mysterious history. The key to the legend's persistence lies in its integration into the everyday life of the communities surrounding Archer Avenue, particularly Justice and Willow Springs. For generations, the story has been passed down not through books, but through oral tradition, told by parents to children, by older teenagers to new drivers, and by bartenders to late-night patrons. This grassroots transmission ensures the ghost remains a tangible local character rather than a distant myth. The physical geography of the haunting also plays a crucial role. Though the suburbs have expanded, Archer Avenue retains its unique character. It remains a major dark thoroughfare that still features long, relatively unlit stretches near the cemeteries. For a generation that often relies on technology, the moments of isolation on this road, especially late at night, create a psychological vulnerability that perfectly accommodates the legend. Every unexpected shape, every sudden cold draft, is immediately interpreted through the lens of the Resurrection Mary story. The enduring cultural importance of the now-burned Willowbrook Ballroom also helped sustain the lore. As a beloved local institution, its association with Mary meant that the story was constantly being revived by people reminiscing about their own experiences there, or fabricating new ones. Even today, the history of the site is inseparable from the ghost story, ensuring the location remains a focal point of Chicago's spectral landscape. In modern times, the legend has adapted to new media. No longer confined to hushed conversations, Mary's story thrives on the internet. Local blogs, paranormal forums, and social media groups dedicated to Chicago lore constantly share new sightings and historical research. These platforms serve as a modern-day campfire, allowing the legend to be updated and validated by a continuous stream of anonymous digital witnesses. The ghost has effectively transitioned from being a roadside phantom to a digital phenomenon, ensuring its survival for future generations. The Resurrection Mary legend serves a deeper purpose for local residents. It acts as a unique cultural identifier. To know the story is to be part of Chicago's identity, connecting current residents to the immigrant communities and Depression-era survivors who first told the tale. She is a reminder that beneath the bustling commerce and glass skyscrapers, there is an older, more haunting Chicago that still lingers in the shadows, waiting patiently for a ride home. She is a permanent, yet unseen, resident of the city. The ultimate testament to the power of the Resurrection Mary legend is its transformation from a mere ghost story into an indelible Chicago tradition. She is an intrinsic part of the city's identity, celebrated and feared in equal measure, and her story is a peculiar blend of history, warning, and melancholic romance that continues to be passed down through generations. Mary's legacy is rooted in her status as a local marker. For anyone growing up in the southwest suburbs, driving past Resurrection Cemetery on Archer Avenue is not a neutral experience. It is an act steeped in folklore. The cemetery gates are not just an architectural feature. They are the legendary drop-off point, a place where reality is famously suspended. This imbues the local landscape with a sense of wonder and the unknown, making the ordinary drive home a potential brush with eternity. The legend functions as a classic rite of passage for young Chicagoans. The first time a teenager drives that stretch of Archer Avenue alone at night, or the first time they share a whispered account of a friend sighting, they are participating in a communal experience. The story tests bravery, confirms local knowledge, and establishes a shared bond with the regional history. It is a story that binds the community, offering a piece of local lore that Chicagoans can proudly, or fearfully, claim as their own, distinguishing their experience from the rest of the nation. Furthermore, Mary's tradition is sustained by the tragic nobility of her character. Unlike malicious or violent phantoms, Mary is a sympathetic ghost. She is perpetually seeking kindness, eternally hoping to complete a journey that was violently interrupted. This pathos gives the story a lasting emotional resonance. Drivers don't just fear her. They pity her, and the act of stopping for a stranger on a dark road becomes a noble, if terrifying, gesture of compassion toward a lost soul. This emotional core ensures the legend remains relevant even as the decades pass. The media's continued fascination is another pillar of her lasting legacy. Every anniversary, every documentary, and every new piece of online chatter reaffirms her status as the city's premier spectral celebrity. This exposure ensures that new arrivals to Chicago quickly learn the name, integrating the tale into the broader, cosmopolitan identity of the city. She stands alongside other local legends and myths, a permanent fixture in the catalog of things that make Chicago, Chicago. Ultimately, Resurrection Mary is a powerful reminder that history is not just found in textbooks and museums. It lives on the streets and in the collective imagination. She is the beautiful ghost who never made it home, and in her eternal, silent journey along Archer Avenue, she has carved out a permanent, celebrated place in the enduring traditions of the Windy City. Her legacy is secured not by monuments, but by the nervous glance drivers cast into their rearview mirrors every time they pass her cemetery gates.